to the Austrian city of Innsbruck, a city that gets its name from this very bridge right here. Back in the day, to travel through Europe north to south and east to west, you had to cross the River Inn, which is the river that I'm stood above right now. Innsbruck technically means bridge over Inn, the river. It's now a multicultural city full of beautiful historical sites and right in the neck of the Austrian Alps. It's beautiful and I cannot wait to discover it more. So the city was originally built on this side of the river only, and they decided, because of the language barrier, so many people were travelling through Europe and not necessarily knowing the language here, they colour-coded the buildings. That's why you see all of these gorgeous pastel colours. To us nowadays, they're just pretty, but they actually had a purpose. So the green would be the butchers and the red would be the pub, for instance. So everyone knew what they were doing and where they were going as they were travelling through. Now the city is huge and it's the other side of the river as well, but the pastel colours continue. And the locals still love to paint their buildings in these beautiful, pretty colours, just to keep with the history of this place. And there's so much culture here in Innsbruck because of the people that travelled through it. And I'm just gonna get to know every last bit of it. Now in the centre of the old town, it's very reminiscent with all of these pastel-coloured buildings in keeping with this beautiful theme here in Innsbruck. And above me is the Golden Roof to show off his wealth and his riches, which he didn't actually have at the time, but he was trying to step up in marriage and wanted to prove that he had all the money, and he wasn't marrying her for that. So this roof, 6 kilos of gold. It's so significant because back in those days they didn't have gold here. America was just being discovered, so it was basically like plastering diamonds on a roof for all to see. And this road goes all the way down to Italy, so it was a true European status symbol. They say that you haven't been to Innsbruck unless you've been up the mountains, and the best thing about this city is it's so easy to do it. It takes 15 minutes to get from the old town where I just was to right up here in the thick of things. I just had to get on one funicular and a cable car, and there's another cable car that goes even higher up. I can't imagine the view gets any better, but I'm headed up anyway. The water that trickles down through them is enriched with minerals, and the air up here just feels healthy. Seeing the old town and now being up here in the mountains, I am ready to move to Austria. I love it. Literally everywhere I put my camera is a frame. It is gorgeous, and I still can't believe I'm 25 minutes away from the old town where I was just, well, it feels like 5 minutes ago. It's crazy. In the winter, this is actually a really famous ski resort. It's the steepest in Austria. I'm brave, but I'm not sure I would ski down this. That is crazy. They're amazing. And to think back in the day, they would make them melting wax, creating the molds, melting the bronze, and the details are so intricate. This belt has got about statues of Maximilian's Habsburg ancestors, and this is King Arthur. So someone as well known as King Arthur standing side beside his ancestors. I've never seen a church like this. This is amazing. And you can understand why it's called the Royal Church and remains to be the same, because you have all of this royalty. So I'm now inside the Royal Palace, and this was reconstructed by the very first Empress, the first Queen of Austria. And she was very much a people's queen. She was loved, in fact, because she developed so much of the modern country of Austria that we see today. And she was also a family woman, so her portrait, which was so different in those days. Usually they would have fallen soldiers or their comrades of war up against the wall in the festivity hall, but this is her children. It's so sweet. And she had 16 of them. This is one of her daughters, and it's awesome to see because usually throughout history the boys would be placed as close to the parents as possible and then the women further back, but she's actually painted them and displayed them in order of which they were born. 16 children. It's just bonkers to think that she ruled a country, was loved, and had this amazing family. And this is a status symbol as well. When people used to come here for the festivities, it was her and her family against the world. I love that. So from the Royal Church now into the Royal Palace, two completely unique forms of buildings. So I'm outside in the courtyard now, and this is all set up for summer concerts. The cool thing about Innsbruck is every single night at 7 o'clock you can come along and watch a free concert here. Looking at the palace from outside, you can really see how modest it was in style and size. And this is where and it's really lovely to see. You can get the ethos of her idea as queen. And this side, this was actually the original city walls, and the palace is built into it. Gives you an idea on size. So Innsbruck is the capital of Tyrol, which is where I am now, the larger place, and I'm at Schloss Ambros, which is quite a mouthful, but a beautiful scene. This actually dates back to 800, and then it was rebuilt and made bigger and grander each time, and in 1560 it was transformed into this Renaissance castle as to what we see it today, and it's quite a lovely story actually. It's a love story in fact. So the Archduke of Tyrol, he was the emperor's son at the time, and of course the king of Austria at the time as well, and he was often told by his dad that he should get married, but he'd actually fallen in love, and he'd secretly married his love a few years before his dad was pushing all of these wives his way. And when his dad, the king, the emperor, found out that he got married, he banished him and his wife from the city. And so the Archduke said, "No, Dad, that's fine. I love my wife, so I'm going to make her the grandest, most beautiful castle there is." So he transformed what was a Gothic castle into this huge Renaissance building that we see today, and it's one of the most beautiful buildings, especially the festivity hall, in the entirety of Austria and Italy. So as well as building this impressive palace for his beloved, he was very interested in his ancestors and war actually. He declared the end of medieval times when cannons were created and decided that soldiers no longer needed to clad themselves in all of this armour when fighting. But he was so interested and so impressed by all of his ancestors and how they did take to the battlefields dressed in items such as these, that he started to collect them. He actually started the world's very first museum because of his interest. He was collecting all of these different armories, and people throughout Europe would send their armors when they won in battle to show off really, but it means that we now have this museum of armor today, and we've got items as young as children's who are learning to fight, and you've got the items that they used to wear on top of the horses when they were jousting. Throughout the entirety of Europe, there's something here. And like I said, it was always a little bit of a brag as to the reason that they sent it here. So everything you see in these cabinets is all men who fought and won on the battlefield. It's such an impressive collection here. There's floors upon floors of armour. It's amazing. And these behind me, those are child suits of armour. And you might look at that and think that's awful because they used to send children to war. But that's not actually the case. To actually own and wear a suit of armour to war was a real wealth symbol. They were really expensive. So to be able to train your children from a young age wearing armour, that is just for the very, very wealthy. And these actually were the Archduke's sons, so these were their two sets of armour, and it's quite a cute, sad but then gets better story. So basically the sons were frowned upon in court because of course their mother was not an aristocrat, so their mother wasn't allowed in court. So when the sons went to battle with the court's children, all of the children used to make fun of them. So one day the Archduke, I really like this guy, he's just got it down, he decided to ask this gentleman, who was a giant as you can see, who just lived in the grounds, he asked him to take his sons down to court for the battle, and his sons were never picked on again. I don't think I would mess with them if this guy was with them, would you? No. So the whole grounds, the gardens, the castle, everything is so beautiful, and it was all out of love for his wife. She wasn't an aristocrat, and therefore she wasn't actually allowed to leave the grounds at all. So the gardens that he built are actually right next to a wet and wild land where lots of animals were living, and there was waterfalls. So they used to hunt there and then grow their own herbs in gardens like this behind me. They were completely self-sufficient, and his wife was so loved by the people. Even though she technically wasn't supposed to leave, she did leave, and she used to go out and help people in the villages dressed as a farmer's wife, whether it was giving them things that they needed in terms of food sources or making medicines from gardens like these in the grounds. So I've now come about 10 minutes outside of town to Swarovski Crystal World. This was developed in 1995 and it was to celebrate the 100 years of Swarovski the crystal, which is made here in Austria. It's very top secret how they make it, but it's known as the best crystals in the world. And inside here, it's almost like a theme park and a play on the crystals themselves. So there's about 16 different rooms of magic, including art installations from all throughout the world. I can't wait to see it. So this is the first room that you enter inside Crystal World, and it really sets the tone for the entire place. You've got a 42-metre, a crystal encrusted horse, and then behind me, really setting the tone, you've got two crystals, the largest in the world with 100 facets, and the smallest, tiniest in the world with just 17. It's all of this that makes all of this. Well, I definitely recommend that. I loved it. Do you know what was amazing as well? Is as you're walking through, it's not just a visual journey. Every room has a different smell and a different sound. It was brilliant. And there's a garden outside which has a water display, so that's right up my street.